Hi there, welcome to your weekly werewolf report. In this, the year of the werewolf. Sorry I look like Farmer Bob today, I have stuff to do outside. So how you doing? This week, we finish up the reread of Gary Brandner's The Howling Trilogy. And, I have found that I forgot a lot about this trilogy. And I found that I actually remembered quite a lot about this trilogy. So the big question today is this. I have the trilogy on my Kindle in ebook form. And when I really like a book, I like to go out and buy a physical copy so that it sits on my shelf so that I can look at it and remember I liked this book. So the question was, since I did like the first book, didn't so much like the second book, the third book was going to be the deciding vote. It was going to be the deal breaker, because if I liked 2 out of 3 of the trilogy, I was going to seek out a nice maybe box set or an omnibus of the trilogy. So what do you think? Do you think I'm going to be buying the trilogy based on my read of the third book? No, I'm not. The answer is hell no. Unfortunately. But I don't feel good about this. I don't like being anything other than positive over here. I want to be a positive voice. I want to lift up good things, but I just can't get behind this one. And look, I'm not going to talk too much about this book because, quite honestly, some of the problems I had with it were technical problems, were problems that I have as a writer, which is weird. And this, again, makes me uncomfortable because undoubtedly Gary Brandner is my better. Undoubtedly. But I think, Gary girl, I think you got some movie stuff mixed in with your story there, because maybe, okay, so the first book came out in 77, I think, and then the second book came out in, I think, 79. The third book didn't come out until 1985, so the movies have been happening at this point. And if there were years or even several months between your reading of these 3 books, maybe you wouldn't have picked up, maybe not as heavily on some of the inconsistencies, time-wise especially. Like, there's a lot of problems. It was in the second book too, but in this third book, it's a big problem. It's a big problem with time. And if it's not just a complete mix-up of time, then it's not written clearly. What is happening is not written clearly, and it's frustrating. And because I read these in a 3-week period, one after the other, my memory is still fresh with some of these, so I see the problems, I see the inconsistencies, and it's annoying. So beyond that, let me just say, this book suffers from a severe lack of likable characters. There are a whole bunch of characters in this, and some of them are written to be unlikable. That's a very common thing that you see. But I didn't like anybody else. I liked 2 characters in this book. Malcolm, our werewolf, our adolescent werewolf, and a carny. And, oh god, I forget his name. Editing summer will fix it. But, and the carny was by far the most awesome character. Just a actually kind, decent dude. And I really liked him. And Malcolm, our werewolf boy. Now, before I keep going, I have to fess up that I'm suffering from some sort of Mandela effect with these books, because I would swear one of these books centered on Karen going to Eastern Europe and looking up sort of the roots of the town of Drago. I could have swore that. And that's not the case. This third book doesn't have any of the cast from the original 2. Karen was gone. Chris Halloran, gone. They're not in this at all. This book, it takes you back to Drago and focuses more on characters we'd never met before, which is interesting. I think that's a good call. The execution didn't work so much for me, but I think that's a good call, because I was sick to death of everybody at the end of the second book. I swear I still remember it. Do you guys ever have the Mandela effect thing happen? Because it doesn't happen to me very often. The only other time I can think of it happening to me is about Bob Barker. I was sitting on my couch with my husband one day, and he said, there's this really frequent Mandela effect people keep experiencing with Bob Barker dying. And I was like, oh, yeah, do they think he didn't die? And my husband's like, no, he didn't die. He's still alive. And I was like, no, he did die. I know he died because I remember it was all over Facebook. And I remember watching this cartoon someone made that was a bunch of dogs and cats dancing around, and kind of it was a vulgar cartoon, but they were singing about how happy they were that they got to keep their nuts. Because Bob Barker was such a proponent of spaying and neutering your pets. And I have this very clear memory of watching this video on Facebook. And my husband's like, look it up. Bob Barker is still alive. And it blew my mind. And I think I'm having that again because I swear one of these books was about Karen going to Eastern Europe and looking up the roots of Drago. No, but I swear I read that book. And it was like, I remember thinking, oh, they kind of based the second Howling movie on this, except not. Like how they take little bits, and there was no Stirba, there was no Christopher Lee's character. It was Karen going and looking up because the G word people, the Romani, she went to Romania, and I swear it happened. I swear it did, and I'm kind of weirded out because it's possible I'm remembering it wrong. It's possible my imagination filled in a hole where this awful book once lived, and I was like, no, it would have been better if they did this. That's possible, but I swear I read that book. But let's just say, yeah, didn't like the book. I didn't like any of the characters. Look, the story gets kind of silly. It gets kind of weird. I don't think I would have ever liked it because of the story, but I would have at least been into it. I would have at least been to a place where I would recommend it to other readers if any of the characters were likable besides Malcolm and this Carney guy who, he doesn't appear until damn near the end of the book, and he's in it for a very short time. Everybody else is just wholly unlikable. And it made it a hard read. I had to, I whined and complained when I knew I had to sit down and finish this book last night because I didn't wanna. So sorry. I wish I could come to you and be like, the first one was good. The second one was a little bit of a stinker, but we came back with a third. That's what I want. I don't want to say, but didn't like. So we don't have to put up a card this week because I'm not really talking spoilers, but yeah, do not recommend. So let's talk about what I watched this week. I went a little different this week just because a lot of people were messaging me to watch one of these, and the other thing that I watched was something that had been on my to watch list for quite a while as soon as it was announced. So the first thing that I watched was the episode of Black Mirror called Mazey Day. So many people messaged me and was like, are you watching the new Black Mirror? There's an episode on a werewolf. And I was like, I'll get to it. And finally I was like, I'm never going to get to it if I don't use this as one of my werewolf watches, because I don't actually sit and watch a whole lot of TV. I've got other stuff going on. So most of the TV that I watch is for the Ghost Riders podcast and for this. Otherwise, I'm not really watching a lot of TV. But yes, I watched the Black Mirror episode called Mazey Day, and I liked it. It's nothing super special. It's nothing super new, but it was good. It was solid. Is it me, or did they really lower the budget on Black Mirror? Significantly, because there were some effects in this, specifically of the main character running through the woods, where the effects were they were bad. And I remember Black Mirror having impeccable effects the first season. Now, truth time, I had to duck out of Black Mirror. I watched maybe 3 to 5 episodes of the first season, and it got way too real for me, and I had to duck out. It was hitting my apocalypse anxiety button in a big bad way, and Not because I didn't like it, not because the writing wasn't anything less than wonderful. It was too much for me. And I always have a high opinion of it, but I haven't watched it since then. So when people were messaging me being like, Werewolf, you gotta watch it, I was like, all right, we'll watch it. And it was good. It's very cynical, very, very critical of celebrity culture, of what we do to people in the limelight. And I found that writing angle was actually brilliant. It was actually like the horrifying things that happen in this episode. You know, we see a werewolf tear people apart. We watch the werewolf murder people. There's blood splattered everywhere, but that's not the horrifying thing that happens in this episode. The horrifying things that happen are what these paparazzi do with their kids. Like, it's awful. And it was a totally great watch. Absolutely recommend. Absolutely. If you have Netflix, yes, watch it. It's a CGI werewolf, and it is a quadruped werewolf. You know how I feel about that. But I will say, there's a scene where they're in a diner trying to get away from the werewolf, and you see the werewolf running through the parking lot. And they're not consistent with the size of the werewolf, which bothers me. But the scene of this werewolf running through the parking lot and seeing how long its legs are and how it runs, it was a good look. That's a good monster. They did a good job, even though it's CGI. It still looked good. It was fascinating. So the second thing that I watched, it's actually I just closed out the thing, because they gave it a weird name, and I won't be able to remember it correctly unless I open the thing I had down. Okay. It's a documentary put out by this production company called Small Town Monsters. Small Town Monsters focuses on cryptids. And let me just say, I am a huge fan of Small Town Monsters. I don't love everything they put out. But of all of the documentaries put out about the Mothman, theirs is head and shoulders above the rest. It is the best documentary on the Mothman. Theirs is called The Mothman of Point Pleasant. So I'm a big fan. Now, what I watched from them, it's called the Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lone Star States, based off of a book by a guy named Aaron Deese. And Aaron Deese is kind of our guide through this. He's the one interviewing people. He's the one talking about it. And I liked it plenty. This isn't the first werewolf documentary that they've done, or Wolfman. They did one on the Beast of Bray Road, and I think they did another one. And yeah, this one was a good time. Disclaimer, my husband fell asleep during it, but I was awake, I was into it. I'm fascinated with cryptids, and I'm fascinated with what could be walking around out there. Now, that could be because of where I grew up. I am a daughter of Appalachia. I grew up walking through the woods. As a little kid, I used to go tromping through the woods barefoot and climbing trees and seeing what's in there. And I know personally, intimately, that feeling of not being alone, of something watching you, of something there with you, and that feeling of all the hairs on your body just standing on end. So this fascinates me. Now, I think one thing, because sometimes documentary makers, and this happens a lot with documentaries, it happens with true crime documentaries sometimes, I think they get tunnel vision. They want to talk about the monster, and they got a bunch of cryptozoologists. They got Lyle Blackburn in there, and I really like Lyle Blackburn. I have a couple books by him, and but I think that they get tunnel vision. They want to focus on the monster. They want to focus on the physical entity or the manifestation. They don't want to get too nuanced, which may be a choice. Maybe this is something that they're doing to cater to an audience. But in this one specifically, I really wish that they had touched on the concept of folklore with this too, because of the way the old timers were referenced a lot. Old homesteaders were referenced a lot. The concept of the Dogman in this particular triangular area in Texas it's old. It goes back, and it goes back to European settlers. They reference specifically German settlers. And that would have been an interesting touch because where I come from, folklore is a huge part of those deep dark woods there. You know the old stories. In my school library, there were folklore books we were encouraged to take out, and I have them here in my home now. It's that folklore is very important to our heritage, and it sounded like it's important to theirs too. They got a little too focused on the Dogmen, the werewolves, whatever you want to call them. Now, there's not a whole lot of, as far as documentaries go, they want to supply you with evidence. And there's nothing that's going to knock your socks off. But they did fascinating interviews. That's something that actually Small Town Monsters is great at. They get fantastic interviews. They are so good at getting people to talk, and really, you want them to embellish. You do. And they do such a good job with doing that. So the Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lone Star State. Now, this is on Amazon Prime and other places. You can look it up. You do have to pay to rent it. But look, this is a small production company. They do the hard work. I follow Small Town Monsters on social media. I suggest you do too. If you have a love of cryptids at all, these people are doing the good work. They do a great job. I really like them. I really enjoyed this. So instead of movies this week, we got a little more out of the comfort zone. But I enjoyed it. It was a fun week, despite the book. So that'll be it this week. Reminder, there will be no werewolf report next week. I've got something I need to finish up before I tear all my hair out from stress. But other than that, I hope the world is treating you well. I hope everything is going great. I hope you are not suffering through Canadian fire smoke like we are down here. It's very strange. Why have the last 7 years been so fucking weird, you guys? I don't know. But that'll be it for me. I will see all of you in 2 weeks. Be safe out there, and bye-bye.